John Brda, CEO of Torchlight Energy.
Well, we appreciate Mr. Brda joining us today. Grateful for his time to do kind of a multimedia press release, if you will. We got a press release on their recent acreage acquirement in the Delaware Basin, and there's also something to do with a Winkler project. So we're very grateful that Mr. Brda can join us today. How you doing?
I'm doing great, and you?
Doing all right today, doing all right. This press release caught my eye because, for one, anything outside of the Permian Basin is good news for people, because Permian seems to be getting a lot of the headline, and rightfully so. But there are other shale plays that are still happening, so this press release caught my eye for that reason, and then also the Winkler Project. So I'd like to ask you about that. First off, what was the reason? What was the if you can share it all? Why'd you guys choose the Delaware when all the other shale plays are going on like they are?
Well, the Delaware Basin, as you know, is probably one of the hottest shale plays. It is Permian Basin era rocks, and between the Midland Basin and the Delaware Basin, it's really where the hottest trends are right now. And this was just a follow-on to what we did in December. We acquired some acreage in December through a three-party agreement with Nico out of Denver, and then Greg McCabe, one of his entities, who is our largest shareholder and chairman. We picked up a small Delaware Basin position in Winkler County back in December, and at that point we were part of an AMI, and so this additional acreage was just acreage that was part of the AMI, and one of the other partners in the AMI had leased the acreage and had to offer it to the rest of us. So we did that, and we basically chose to exercise our option to participate in that acreage. And then in addition to that, MECO 4 was going to be drilling a well starting this summer, but they had an aggressive timeline and wanted to get started earlier. So this particular well was in the offset acreage that was just acquired, and so we decided to move our carry onto this well. So we have no CapEx in this drilling of this particular well, and we're going to be dissecting and going through about 5 different pay zones in the Delaware Basin, but ultimately it'll likely be a Wolfcamp A or Wolfcamp B well. We'll determine that after the pilot hole is drilled.
What determines those different layers? Is there a layman's view of that? I mean, because you're right, the Delaware, the Wolfcamp, the Permian, they're all like kind of connected.
Yeah, the layers are, for example, Midland Basin probably has in the sweet spot of the Midland 5 or 6 different layers or zones, benches, so to speak, that you can drill to horizontally. And in the Delaware Basin, the more you get to the deepest section of the Delaware, that could be 8 or 9 benches that you're targeting over time, and that's why the acreage positions are worth so much money. You just saw probably a couple weeks ago with the Concho purchase of RSP Permian, paying upwards of $70,000 an acre, and there's a reason for that. They're going to be drilling an acreage for the next 50 years. It's just insane how much there is to drill out there, and so that's why the acreage value is so high, and we're happy to be there. Even though it's a very small project for us, we're happy to be there for sure.
What's the Winkler Project? You touched on it earlier, but just kind of a brief overview of that.
Yeah, the Winkler Project is just how we internally refer to it as. There's about 1,080 gross acres, of which we have an 8 in Winkler County, Texas, and it is just coming down off of the Central Basin platform into the Delaware Basin. It's a little bit shallower than the deepest portions of the Delaware, so we'll probably only encounter 4 to 5 potential horizontal targets. Still, even in a worse day, that's a great thing. So we're very happy to have the position, and the geology and the work that was originally done on this acreage was done by Rich Masterson, who was our consulting geologist on our projects, and he is kind of the guru of the Permian Basin. And if you ask around the basin with all the geologists out there from different companies, ask about Rich Masterson, they all think he's the guy. And in fact, he's won a couple of Lifetime Achievement Awards from his peers based upon his work in the Delaware and Midland Basin. So great guy to have on our team, and all of this came about because of his geologic work.
John Brda, CEO Torchlight, based out of Plano, Texas, talking about the Delaware Basin acreage they recently acquired. Next question, see if we can't make sense of this, because sometimes I don't even understand my own questions, but what kind of pushed you guys over the edge to do this? I say that because so much innovation has happened to where sometimes you need just to get the right chemistry worked out, or the right numbers to work out, or oil prices to be at the right thing, or even leases for landowners to work things out. Was it a combination of things? I guess what was the rationale for the timing of now to do this?
Really, for us, it really was forced upon us by the acquisition within our AMI by a couple of other partners. So we had to make a decision on it rather quickly, and based upon what we had to pay for the acreage, which was not disclosed, and what acreage around us is going for, it was kind of a no-brainer to pick this up.
Okay.
And it is directly west of our current leasehold position, and so this is truly a bolt-on piece of land for us. So we're very happy to get it at a very good price, and it's already drilling and already down to 5,000 feet. So we're very happy to have it, and it'll be the first in probably, I would say, between 25 and 30 wells to be drilled out there, potentially over the next 2 to 3 years. Outstanding.
If you got a few more minutes, I just want to ask you about how some of the activity in the other shale plays going. Are you guys seeing some work in other shale plays?
Oh yeah, we really focus on West Texas. We have a big 12,000 acre position in the Midland Basin, Eastern Midland Basin, that we're currently developing. However, we are marketing that position as we speak. But for us as a company, as Torchlight, our biggest play is a 133,000 acre position we have in the Oro Grande Basin, which is really West Texas. It's about 30 miles east of El Paso. And the Oro Grande Basin was tried and failed back in early 80s and the early 2000s, when people were trying for a more conventional, deeper gas, and drilled right through the shales and silts. And if you kind of fast forward 10 years, 11 years, it wasn't until 2010, 11, 12 where people were starting to figure out that these shales and silts can be potential horizontal targets. And that's when Rich Masterson and Greg McCabe went out and tied up that acreage. And we are now testing our first horizontal in that acreage right now, and things are looking really, really good. So for us, if we can prove up that acreage, it's going to be a game changer for Torchlight for sure.
Are you guys hitting your milestones on that? And I know sometimes, you can get ahead of the curve and you can hit some snags, and you got to, get a little bit of learning experience, especially when it comes to, some of this unconventional drilling. So how's the overall 5,000 foot view? You said, great and everything, but are you guys feeling pretty confident about things?
Well, we're very, very confident about things, but I do think that, from a macro perspective, you're going to start seeing some things kind of clog up the system, meaning there are a lot more acres to drill in the Permian, both Midland, Delaware, and where we're drilling in the Oro Grande. People still need to hold acreage, but there's a shortage of horsepower for frac crews, and a shortage of frac crews itself. And sand is becoming, more difficult to get logistically. So, that's really what's going to hold back the play. I don't see us, that particular region getting more frothy than it is without solutions to those problems. And in addition to that, one of the other things we're seeing is that some of the larger companies in the play are getting some heat from shareholders to start thinking about profitability and drilling out of cash flow, as opposed to just being overly aggressive on growth. So I think those two things could slow down the process in the Permian. Even though we're at $70 oil, you still have constraints that are going to keep it from getting the volumes increasing exponentially.
Yeah, it's interesting because this is, you've heard the term disruptors, I'm sure. That's almost it's almost ad nausea to the point nowadays. But 10 years ago, it had meaning. There was meaning, especially in the media. The internet was a major disruptor to my industry. The business. The media, so much so that, Los Angeles Times and Chicago Tribune, these newspapers that made a profit for 110 years went bankrupt within 10 years after the internet came. So, there was a disruptor. Right. The one thing that I've noticed about the oil and gas industry is the term disruptors gets thrown out a lot when I don't believe that's the case. Almost the term hesitators seems like a more appropriate term, because it's not going to totally kill the industry. It's causing it to just rework itself out. And right now I see where the jobs and today's worker is really going through that ironing process to where sometimes they almost got to wait for that starter pistol to go off because of, like you said, the frac sand crews and supply and demand. And I was just talking to the pipeline authority up in North Dakota, Justin Krinkstead, and he said by next year their pipelines are going to be at max capacity, so the trains are going to start up again. So you have all these little choke points that are happening throughout the industry, and that's kind of what I see right now. And I see the worker right now being a big one, to where you've got a variety of things that are being ironed out from, the youth or the rookies coming into the industry really don't have an understanding of how the industry works. And so there's that learning curve. And then there's just they're not slinging chains anymore. We've got more of a robotic and, in engineering workforce. And then there's so many compliance things happening. So what's your kind of macro view of today's workforce versus, the jobs of old and things?
Well, it's interesting. I think there's a major gap, particularly on the geo side, geologic and geophysics side. Some of the old guard is still in place, but they're retiring. And in this last downturn that we had, some of the people that were let go aren't coming back to the industry. So there's a major disconnect between the old guard and the new guard, and those coming out of college and those working their way up the ranks. That are really driven by technology, which is, inherently a good thing, but you also have to have that field experience and that general knowledge base that the older guys have that can lead you in the right direction that may not appear on paper or on a computer screen. And it just comes from industry experience and having done it that is really invaluable in my mind. So I think we have a tough task at hand for those that older generation to kind of teach the way of the new generation, and still allowing them to use the latest and greatest tools at their disposal, which is fantastic. But I think there's some learning curve there for sure for the younger guys.
Yeah, I got to tell you, for the people listening, I didn't pay John Brda to say that, because what you just said is what our narrative has been for the last several years, which is 70% of the industry is retiring in the next 5 to 10 years. In fact, most of those people are retiring in the next 5, and you just validated a lot of what we were saying by they ain't coming back after they take time off, and that's currently happening. So one of the big things that we've tried to do is we've tried to be that bridge between the guys on the well site to the guys up in the the CEO offices and vice versa and that sort of thing, because there is a gap. There is an information gap. There's almost these silos that have been created because we are entering a time now where some people in the energy world have never even been on an oil rig before, and they're having major decision-making power, whether it be from an executive level or from a government compliance level or what that might be. And that's had a kind of a little bit of a shift too, I've seen. Have you noticed that at all?
I have. It's interesting you should say that. There are a lot of folks in the industry that have never been out to a rig site or to have seen a frac even. To see it in person and to see all that goes into it, it's really quite an exercise in just phenomenal engineering and just teamwork, quite frankly, to see it all come together. And there's a lot of people that are sitting in front of a computer screen, geosteering, for example, that have never been out there and not really are seeing cuttings come out of the hole in real time to make decisions and things of that nature. So you're right. It's an interesting time that we're seeing right now in the industry, and hopefully universities and the people that are really supplying our talent for the future will get busy and start recruiting because we need it badly.
John Brda, the CEO of Torchlight, and we're just going to a few more minutes if he doesn't mind. We've extended our time into overtime here because the conversation's so good. And one of the questions I did want to ask you was something that we ask a lot of our different guests that come on this program, and I'm glad that you're a CEO because the CEO is an example I give. And I just kind of want to get your reaction on this because a lot of people do think this is true, but maybe it's not true from your point of view. And the example I give is the energy economy. When I went out to the shale plays and started looking around, it took me about 30 seconds to realize the way economic opportunity and the way that the whole energy economy works. And the energy economy is the CEOs at the oil company to the truckers, all the way to the local cafe owners and everybody in between. That's kind of the way we look at it here, is that, it takes all those people to frack a well. You talked about the geosteers and the frack crews. I'm even thinking, it takes even the cafe owners to feed those guys to make sure that stuff happens. How do you guys look at that energy economy? I mean, you kind of said it with the frack crews and everything, but would you mind elaborating a little more?
I think you're 100% right. I go out to Midland quite a bit, and just seeing the hustle and the buzz out there, like you say, from all the truckers on the road to the people in the diners and the hotel staff, and try getting a hotel room in Midland right now. It's impossible. And so, the trickle-down effect of the energy space is tremendous, and hopefully we'll stay in a range that is sustainable for quite some time, as opposed to the drastic spikes and ultimate declines we've had in the past. But I think for everyone to stay in a range that's sustainable, where everybody's making a fair wage and a decent living and an acceptable internal rate of return would prove to be invaluable for our space, quite frankly.
Any final thoughts? I'd like to give guests kind of the final word. That way the question's not framed by me at all. If they want to reiterate something or mention something we haven't talked about.
I just think we're not only in the macro sense, but also at our level with Torchlight Energy, being a publicly traded company, we're very excited about what's going on right now. Very excited about the future of the space. And I think we're in for some exciting times in the next 2 or 3 years for sure.